Welcome to Sara Gonzales Unfiltered. Happy Friday. Just for you guys, on Friday, I decided to have our very own Steve Baker, of course, Blaze Media investigative reporter, in today to discuss all of the latest in what you've uncovered as far as, I would say, January 6th, but it's just so much more than that. It's like January 6th was the starting point. And now you've uncovered a whole lot of corruption at some of the highest levels. And it's funny, Steve, because some people might say that you were unfairly targeted as a reporter to shut you up. And somehow you've done the exact opposite. It's had the opposite desired effect of them targeting you. And now you're like, okay, now I'm uncovering all your dirty secrets.
Look, I didn't ask for this.
Yeah.
Okay. They weaponized me against them. We've heard about weaponized government.
Yeah.
This is weaponized Steve.
You don't want weaponized Steve Baker.
No, and I just told somebody earlier today, I said, I'm not playing to win. Because I can't win. Right. As it relates to my case, right. I can't win. It's a fait accompli. They've got a 99.75% conviction rate there with D.C. juries and D.C. judges in all of these January 6 cases. I'm not playing to win. For the Star Trek enthusiast, this is my Kobayashi Maru, if you know what that is. That's the unwinnable Starfleet Academy flight simulator that Captain Kirk is the only person that ever beat it. And that when people asked him, how did you beat it? He said, I cheated. That was it. Yeah. And so I'm not playing to win, but I am playing to make sure that America knows about the abusive nature of our Department of Justice, our weaponized three-letter agencies, the Biden administration, and what they are doing to individuals, not just like me, but people who have had it far worse than me. If I can use what I'm about to take upon myself to shine and reflect that light on their cases, then that's what we're going to do. We're going to tell the stories about these people, but not just the people that are being abused. We're going to reveal who the abusers are. Well,
it sounds like we are. I told you in text, I think, I was like, all right, I'm just going to grab my popcorn and watch the fireworks here. And they have started, Steve. So tell everyone the latest on what you have revealed over at theblaze.com this week.
Yeah, we showed absolute corruption, fraud, lying to the department during investigations, basically an embezzlement or a scheme that is what they call it's kind of a payroll overtime backfilling scheme, as they called it, an actual felony committed by three of these, what they called the officers that were on the dignitary protection detail at the time. A captain and a couple of lieutenants were involved in this. That captain is now the number 2 man at the Capitol Police, the assistant chief of police there. Hold
on. One of the guys who engaged in a fraudulent overtime scheme and was caught engaging in a fraudulent overtime scheme is now the second in command at Capitol Police?
That's correct. He is now Assistant Chief of Police, Sean Gallagher, as we called him out in the story. And the second person that was involved in this, what the Capitol Police in their investigation called, we have the documents, they called it a conspiracy. The second person involved in this conspiracy, his name is Deputy Chief of Police John Erickson, which on Capitol Hill, the other officers called him Teflon John, because this wasn't the first thing that he messed up on. 1997, He was on the dignitary protection detail of then Speaker Newt Gingrich. He was in the lead group to go down and make sure everything was safe in San Antonio at an event that Gingrich was going to be speaking at there. And the San Antonio police found him at 3:30 in the morning, slumped over in his car, completely intoxicated, completely passed out in his USCP, Capitol Police, rented vehicle. And then when they took him in, he refused the breathalyzer. Obviously, they charged him. And then suddenly he gets a minor slap on the wrist when he gets home, and it's brushed away. 5 years later, in 2002, the same Teflon John Erickson, driving his own car, intoxicated, slams into the back of a Maryland State Trooper's car, injuring the trooper. He gets another slap on the wrist. 10 years later, he engages in this backfilling overtime pay scheme, which again, multiple felony actions that they took to initiate and to perpetrate this scheme, including stealing money from the government, ostensibly us, you and me,
right?
the taxpayer.
Yeah.
And for which the documents that we have said that they should have been turned over to the DOJ for felony prosecution because they were crimes. These weren't just violations of Capitol Police handbook. Were crimes committed. They were not. They got slaps on the wrist. And as we've seen, one of those, Teflon John, is now deputy chief of police. And, of course, Sean Gallagher is what they call Unit 2 now. He's the second in command. You know,
it does make one wonder what you have to do to get fired over at Capitol Police if, DUIs and stealing money from taxpayers and all of these other things don't seem to get you there. It does make one wonder, what must you do?
Sarah, I know things right now that I want to bust out and start shouting into this microphone about other individuals up there that we're looking at, but we don't have the paper trails, we don't have all of the I's dotted and T's crossed right now. But I will tell you, we're going to find them and we're going to reveal your domestic violence charges. We're going to reveal your DUIs, and we are going to show the American people the corruption at the highest level. And unfortunately, the reason why they get by with it. And you and I have talked about it before.
Yeah.
It's the power that they hold, particularly because they are the Praetorian Guard, the personal bodyguards of the most powerful people in the country. And they know everything that they do. They know all of their secrets. They know who they're sleeping with. They know they know what all their other bad habits are. Yeah. And consequently, it gives them incredible power. And that's why they have, in the lower level Capitol Police officers, the frontline people, good officers that want to come forward and talk, that are afraid to. They're afraid because of the power of the Capitol Police. And as a result of that, they tell us that it seems to be, if you know just the right thing or you hold the right, cards in your hand, that it actually accelerates your rise in rank despite your disciplinary actions.
So I would like to this is Sara Gonzales speaking, not Steve Baker. I like to always throw this out there. But to me, it does make it, I would say, a lot plausible that if you have a Capitol Police that is just clearly completely corrupt, right? Because the people who are corrupt are just getting promoted, not fired, right? So you can imagine that those aren't the only people who have gotten away with a whole bunch of dirty deeds and been elevated rather than removed. So one would assume I would assume that Capitol Police is likely filled with a whole bunch of corrupt people. So then it doesn't make it that difficult to imagine that if you have a whole bunch of corrupt people, they wouldn't mind participating in some sort of a plan to frame certain people on a particular day. seems pretty plausible to me that when you have a whole bunch of bad actors and you have a whole bunch of very strange coincidences on one day, and we all are like, hold on a second. How did that happen with this? And also this happened. Oh, and also this happened. No, it seems to be that is probably more likely than less likely, in my opinion.
It's interesting you bring this up.
Is it?
Because, as you know, back in, when was it? Early October, we did our first story in a series of stories about these particular officers who we believe, we have all the evidence, we've shown the evidence of perjury in the first Oath Keepers trial. One of those is, again, Dignitary Protection Detail Special Agent David Lazarus is our primary target in that story. Because he had no reason whatsoever to make up this grand story of having seen a contentious, antagonistic encounter between 4 Oath Keepers and Officer Harry Dunn. He had no reason to create this out of thin air whatsoever, yet he did. What he claimed he saw in trial 3 or 4 times as he was rescuing Nancy Pelosi staffers, it wasn't happening either.
Right,
but anyway, the point being, what he claims he saw in great detail 3 or 4 times, we showed in a video expose that he was in another building.
Right.
Could not have seen it. He didn't arrive till well after that incident was over with. And on the 1st of this month, March 1st, Congress, Barry Loudermilk from the admin committee's, what do they call it, oversight subcommittee, sent a letter to Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger demanding information about this officer, his disciplinary reports, not just the one that they opened as a result of our story. Oh, yes. See, I just learned that this week.
Oh.
Yes, they opened a report, a disciplinary action, what they call an OPR, Office of Professional Responsibility. It used to be called Internal Affairs. That's, newspeak for whatever. So the point being is they actually did open an investigation into our allegations of perjury in that trial. And they also demanded, and I say they, the Oversight Committee demanded more information about a prior disciplinary action in 2016, which should have prevented David Lazarus, special agent, from even being on the force. He should have been terminated. He committed at what they call a terminal event. And again, alcohol was the beginning of it, and then it escalated from there. And then the most important and most significant aspect of that is that the information about that disciplinary action was never turned over to the Oath Keepers' attorneys so that they could impeach his testimony at the very least. He shouldn't have been there in the first place. And, of course, as we've already revealed, those videos that I discovered in the Capitol CCTV viewing room that proves that he did, in fact, lie in court, those were never given to the Oath Keepers' attorneys.
Is that, I understand you're not an attorney. I'm not a legal expert either, but that seems like that would be enough reason to ask for, I don't know, a mistrial or an appeal or something. There's got to be something that they can do, right? Just
before you and I started taping here today, we were waiting on something from Congress, and theblaze.com will have it here. It's probably posting right as you and I are
by the time we're actually airing, I'm sure.
This conversation. And we will show you what the law says about that. Okay. This is a huge violation by the Department of Justice and the Capitol Police, because it doesn't matter whether it's state, local, federal. They have to turn this information over to the defense attorneys under 2 different statutes. It's called Brady and Giglio. And they violated both of those in spades by putting that officer on the stand.
Feels a whole lot like, we have all of these illegals that are pouring through our borders, and they seem really concerned with making sure that all of those people get due process. And now but then they're like, we don't want to know actual Americans. Well, they're conservatives, so we don't really want to give them any due process. Just throw them in prison, actually, forever. That'd be great.
Is due process for the illegal aliens when they are given a court date in 2035? Is that what due process is?
Yeah, exactly.
So they're in compliance.
Right.
Until then.
Right. Well, don't you know, Steve, that by then, well, first of all, they are giving a super duper pinky promise that they will show up to their court date. And everybody knows that those are completely unbreakable and you have to show up. And then in the rare event that they do show up, they'll say, well, now I have a life here. I have a family here. You can't rip me from my family and everything will be okay.
The ones that don't start a family here and start making babies here, they murder, rape, and otherwise, and then they show up in court. So they get an early court date.
Right. And still they would get more due process than any of the January 6ers.
Well, yes, and then of course, if you're a misdemeanor, nonviolent, glorified trespasser, or what I call an accidental tourist that day, you get leg chains.
Right. Got to shackle those people.
I can
up.
Speak to that.
Yeah, you can far too well, actually. Okay, Steve, will you stick around?
I would love to.
Okay, great. All right. Well, let's bring in our other guest when we return. All right, welcome to the show, Eric July, Belize TV contributor and founder of Rippaverse Comics. Eric, I'm so glad you're here for this particular story joining us, because you guys both are going to be thrilled to hear. I think congratulations is in order, that there has been a $1.2 trillion spending package that was released in the very early hours of Thursday morning. I want to get into what all it's, some of the expenditures that they plan for us. But I first want to give you guys a round of applause for no, you're not excited about the $1.2 trillion spending package?
Not joining you on that one.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe I can change your mind when I tell you all of the beautiful things that we're spending if this were to go through, which, by the way, it may not, because before I get into it, I would just like to point out, apparently, MTG has filed a motion to remove Speaker Mike Johnson for endorsing this $1.2 trillion spending deal. So we'll see what happens. It sounds like complete chaos once again, which honestly I would prefer over a $1.2 trillion spending package. If we can get the chaos and prevent more things from happening, I love gridlock, actually. People are like, oh, you Republicans are the party of no. Yes, I love that. I think we should say no way more often. So let me just maybe I'll win you over on this 1.2 trillion. I know I won't. So, over $100 million to fund the diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings for the Department of Health and Human Services. Okay, $4.7 million to the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Department of Homeland Security. You guys may have not thought that we needed a Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at DHS, but there is a lot of diversity down at the border. So maybe they just wanted to make sure that they had the CDIO, Chief Diversity and Inclusion, the CDIO over at the border. I don't know. $775,000 is set aside for the African Career Education and Resource, whose values focus on racial equity. And they say they operate from a race equity lens. But hold on. Wait, there's more, okay? $100 million, more than $100 million, and includes $146,000 requested by New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, is going to Apicha Community Health Center in New York, which provides letters for sex change surgeries. I'm not done, okay? You guys are like, okay, is that all? No, I'm not done. $400,000 that was earmarked by John Fetterman to fund the Built by Us podcast, which you guys might not think that that's a good spend right there, but he does have 101 subscribers on YouTube, maybe 102 by the time that this show airs. I don't know. So he will be getting $400,000 for this particular podcast. And there's more. $9 million in earmarks for Dianne Feinstein, who is dead. So
So
it just
they
goes
get
on.
to vote when they're dead, and they get funded when they're dead.
Sounds like a pretty sweet deal, honestly.
I've got to become a Democrat.
Yeah, I know. It really pays to be a Democrat in so many ways. So some of these Feinstein after post-death line items here: $1.8 million for UC Davis, $500,000 for the San Diego Zoo, $1 million for health resources in Fresno, whatever that means, $1 million for the Susanville Indian Reservation, $1.4 million for Napa's fuel reduction and community infrastructure protection, and it goes on and on and on and on. And there is $400,000 to be funneled to the Briar Patch Youth Services, which gives chest binders to teenagers. So you guys can know. I mean, you may have thought, what is my money actually going to? But I've told you all of the wonderful things that your money, your taxpayer money, is going to be used to fund. And you may think that they just sound like pet projects. But really, it's for the community. Eric just wants...
No, it's now the earmark thing. Those.
That's all that this is.
Well, yeah, because those.
It's everyone's pet projects.
It's all bizarre because how earmarks work. Basically, they have to spend the money like regardless. It's just the setup in itself is nonsensical. But when you talk about like things going to DHS, $100 million here for these fake ass jobs. They're not real. None of them actually exist. And by they don't exist, I mean there's no true demand for diversity, equity job. It's not a real job. There's no market demand for it. They completely made it up, and this includes when you see that stuff in the sort of private sector, which oftentimes is why when the layoffs start coming, those are the first people to go because they're not necessary and they're certainly not needed. But this is government in action. They put out in all these bills. They put so many different things that are in there, and they're all voting on, and they're all in the cahoots, be it some Republicans, Democrats, and what have you. Why they don't treat everything like a sort of line item and vote per item. We know that's why they don't do that, because it'd be far more difficult to pass that stuff, and often the American people aren't going to read what's in these bills anyway. I don't know what they should have did. What they usually do is give it a real pretty name. Right? Because then that's how you really convince people to give it. So maybe the bill has nothing to do with it, but if you call it like the anti-lynching spending bill.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
If you call it that, then all is good. All is good. All is creative. But
you don't like it? What, you're against, you're pro-lynching?
Yeah, you
is
have
that what
to
you're
be.
saying? You're pro-lynching?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. I see how it is.
Exactly. So that's how they do this. But I think people need to understand how money in general works when it comes to the government, and why I think the economic part of it is what is always lost when discussing this very topic. The government is not like myself, being a private, I own a business, own a couple of them actually. And whereas the money that I'm playing with, right, especially with like the Rippaverse where we don't take loans or anything, right? I got to serve these customers. I got to use that money to then maybe do another project, maybe expand, whatever it is that I have to do. But that's the money that I'm dealing with, right? And that's how 99% of America works. Well, the ones that aren't part of the more public sector. When you're dealing with government, it's the complete opposite. And let me backtrack just a little bit, if I may. Well, I have incentive to operate my business with peak efficiency because the money just don't grow on trees.
Right.
So if I do something and I lose an exorbitant amount of money, that could like derail my company, right? I could lose my company. The government doesn't operate like that because they don't have to earn anything, okay? All the money that they had is either printed and or assets sold from unborn children, okay? Your unborn children, through deficit, debt spending, whatever you want to call it, okay? And the government knows each year. They blatantly, which is criminal by itself, how they like just know that, hey, we're not going to bring in this amount of money, but we're going to spend it anyway. It's called a deficit. We're still going to spend it. Nonetheless, what true incentive do they have to be efficient with the money that they know that they don't necessarily have to earn? They can steal it from people. They can steal it. That's what taxation is. They get to just steal it from people, and they don't have to earn it. And if they do piss it away, there is zero consequences to that. None. No, there's no true consequence to that. Even if they are cheapening the dollar, well, each year they're going to vote to give themselves a raise anyway. It doesn't matter. That stuff is what we have to deal with. That incentive is just fundamental economics. If you look at economics as a study of human action, you can understand why they will put forth a bill where they're giving $100 million to people with fake ass jobs.
I don't know, Eric. I mean, I think you should be a little bit nicer about it. You could apply. Chief
True.
Diversity and Inclusion Officer.
I
could do it.
Be making a lot more money than what I am right now.
I'm just saying, Steve's white. He can't do it. They would never hire him. They would never hire him. Right. For you, maybe 4.7 million.
Maybe
that's a pretty sweet gig.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even care about the economics anymore. I'm done worrying about it. None of it makes sense. None of it adds up. We all know it's funny money anyway. Yeah. So I told you earlier, I'm just going to go scorched earth.
You did.
And an hour ago, I received a text from a 25-year close friend of Speaker Johnson, and his text said to me, he said, as much as it pains me, I think Mike is now toast.
Wow.
And he could have been a hero.
Could have.
I had high hopes for him.
He deserves that. He deserves to be toast.
I had high hopes for him. We're both from the same hometown, Shreveport, Louisiana. I've had access to him. I've been able to actually talk to him twice over January 6th related issues. And so I thought that maybe he would be the guy.
Yeah. He's
not the guy.
Yeah. But to be fair, neither was Kevin McCarthy, right?
Well, of course not.
So I know when we were going through this whole big speaker chaos the first time around and everyone was like, Matt Gaetz shouldn't have done that. It's like, I mean, I disagree because I think if you can have a little bit of chaos to set the precedent, we're not going to take it anymore. And you will have consequences if you go along to get along when it comes to something as important as $1.2 trillion spending package. I think that if these people get put on notice that the rest of them aren't playing around anymore, we're more likely to get, if it's not Mike Johnson, who is it?
I don't know,
but someone.
I don't think that Mike Johnson is one of those guys that, we talked about earlier, that the Capitol Police have something on him. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's one of those guys.
Seems very wholesome.
But he was a compromiser even before. He had a 72% Liberty ranking. Yep. That means that he's voting with the Democrats 28% of the time. Exactly. And in order for him to get that position in the first place, he had to make deals and say, yes, I will. When the vote comes, I will compromise on this. Or he wasn't getting that speakership. Right. It just was not going to happen. And of course, McCarthy was like a 52% voting. Right. I mean, he was just a pure compromise.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe we're just going to get a little bit better incrementally each time.
Until you end up on Thomas Massey.
Yeah. Don't threaten me with a good time.
I mean, that's what needs to happen. Look, I've obviously called Republicans chicken crap all the time. I don't understand how they drop the ball with this type of stuff anytime. I mean, look, we talk about these liberty ratings, right? And the guys that make the most sense for you guys are the ones that are libertarian, admittedly libertarian every single time. It's been like that since Ron Paul was in office. It was like that when I know people, including Trump, threw his ass under the bus, but Amash was a better voter than 99% of the Republicans. And so obviously in the Senate, when you look at Rand Paul, it's so obvious. It's like if spending is truly something that you want to rein in, Rand Paul comes up with the Festivus report every single year. Mm-hmm. And you find out that they're spending money on like pigeons playing slot machines and all kinds of crazy stuff that they're spending money on. They're right there. That's the direction where the party should be going. Not these sort of milquetoast cats who, for whatever reason, every time when it's all said and done, they will vote with the Democrats and they will spend an insane amount. I don't think people understand how much money $1 trillion is. You can try to say off the top of your head, it's this many zeros. No, it's more than that. Yeah. That is a lot of zeros, man, and it's just being peed away.
Yeah, yeah. Which, by the way, I had someone who sent me an email from my website that I got, and they were like, well, why don't you go tell your buddy Mike Johnson that he's not doing anything to fix the border down to they're spending all this money. And I'm like, my buddy Mike Johnson, I don't know who the hell you think you're talking to, but I have never given Mike Johnson credit for pretty much anything, including not at the border. And I've called Republicans out multiple times on that. No border security, but we want to spend all this money on Ukraine, all this money to Israel, all this money on, all of these pet projects, and we can't even defend our own borders. So I have not been anyone to be like, oh, I love that guy, Mike Johnson. He's a true conservative. That's never been me. Just to be clear here, Ty. All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be back with more. I want to thank our sponsor, the segment Relief Factor. So, look, those of you who, I know there's millions of Americans who are living in constant pain for all different sorts of reasons. It could be, tennis elbow, knee pain, neck pain, whatever the case may be. The most likely cause is usually you just have inflammation in your body and it causes these aches and pains. And if you don't actually target the inflammation, anything else that you do is just going to be a temporary Band-Aid to mask the pain, but it's still going to be there. So Relief Factor is different in that it is a very, very strong anti-inflammatory. It's not going to make you feel loopy. It's all natural. It was developed by doctors, but it doesn't make you feel weird. It just targets the inflammation in your body. And oftentimes that's going to get you out of pain and it can be life-changing. So if you're in pain, do yourself a favor, order the 3-week quick start pack. Okay, 70% of the people who try that go on to keep ordering more. That's how many people it's working for. It can work for you. The odds are in your favor that it can get you out of pain. It's $19.95. It comes with a guarantee. So you've got nothing to lose except your pain. All right. Why not try it? It's relieffactor.com. Get that quick start over at relieffactor.com. All right, so yesterday, a federal judge tossed a conservative group's lawsuit against the D.C. law that allows non-citizens, including illegal immigrants and foreign embassy staff members, to vote in local elections. She just tossed it out, saying that the complaint lacks standing. Now, I try to talk about this as often as I can because I know that a lot of people on the left they say, oh, the great replacement, that's a conspiracy theory. That's you guys, that's super racist. You're not allowed to talk about that. And they're not just bringing in people so that they can have them vote eventually, or they're not just bringing in people so that we can adjust the numbers for the next census and all of these heavily left-leaning districts will have, more representation. That's not happening. Well, non-citizens are able to vote in multiple different places now, local elections. This is the Local Resident Voting Rights Act of 2022 that states if a non-citizen has resided in D.C. for at least 30 days, they can vote, they can run for office, they can serve on the city's Board of Elections. And the judge says, in this particular case, says that your right to vote has not been denied. You've not been subjected to discrimination or denied opportunities, and your rights as citizens have not been subordinated because of non-citizens having the right to vote. So they identify nothing that has been taken away or diminished and no right that has been made subordinate to anyone else's.
She said that they were not able to demonstrate that citizens had been harmed by these votes. Yes, they have. They canceled my vote. Right.
That's the harm. I mean, physically, no. But of course you would have harm when you're talking about people whose interests do not align with a United States citizen. How could I'm like, every day I read any of the headlines, I'm like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills or I'm in the Twilight Zone or something. And I'm like, you scream about it and you get called a conspiracy theorist. And it's like, but they're literally doing it. They're literally doing it. And by the way, it's not just here. Dallas. There's a move in Dallas to allow non-citizens onto city boards. So Texas, in Dallas. So I don't know. Seems to me it's all happening according to plan. And as much as we scream about it, nothing, it's like they're just going to do it. It's just going to happen.
I don't think that this is one of those things where, first of all, that people should be looking to the federal government to try to resolve it anyway, because that's not even in their best interest, especially the ones that are in there now, to try to fix this issue. But I do think that it does speak to why this movement, I think people are considering it a little more now, of decentralization is so very vital and so very, very, very important, because if those are the rules that we're going to play by, right, where basically you're saying that people that don't have particular skin in the game in a similar way to their neighbor, right, are going to be able to vote for policy that impacts said neighbors, especially if we're talking about the local level, which is where it arguably matters the most, then I want to minimize that power that they have as much as possible, because that is dangerous. I do think that, and look, it won't be convenient. It won't be pretty if we really do start to reanalyze just the overall concept of voting in this country, what it means, who should be allowed to do it, all that stuff. Because a lot of
we need to have way more qualifications.
I'd agree. I mean, obviously, I'd agree with that 1,000,000%. But when you start to talk about that, people get a little pissy about it, because
I know.
they look at like the history of America, and these groups of people were not allowed to vote for maybe what was superficial reasons. But I do believe that there are reasons that are not superficial, which it's not about you making a decision, because you should be able to be free to make that decision. The problem with how we look at voting, or what voting actually impacts, is that it impacts me.
Right.
It impacts the neighbor. So your particular vote, which is why it's so dangerous. When I look at people that are incredibly stupid that are able to vote, and it counts just as much as I do, but they're able to vote on something that impacts me and doesn't even impact them, especially like with something like taxes. I say this especially now that I've entered into this newer bracket in these recent years.
All right, Eric.
No, I'm saying this because the taxes are going up, and I also look at like, damn, I could help my local economy far more by being able to employ more people and do other things if I could keep more of that money. But then there's someone who's like a negative net taxpayer, in the sense that they take in more than they pay, that has no issues on raising my taxes, right?
Yes, it's a conflict of interest.
Right. If you look at it just like that, through that lens, it's a problem. So when stories like this pop up, I do think, to your point, Sarah, it is very, very important to discuss. But I do believe that voting in general, local level, at the federal level, whatever, should be, I think we need like a more larger movement to really analyze like qualifications, because of who it impacts. It's not about trying to keep people out of making decisions. It's like, okay, I don't want these decisions to be made up to groups of people anyway. But if they absolutely have to be, if we're talking about it from a more incremental standpoint, we got to try to get to that direction. Well, at minimum, we should be able to accept that some people just don't have the same skin in the game as others.
I completely agree with that. What say you, Steve?
We've moved past, the taxation without representation idea to the taxation by, preferential treatment to those people who, as you said, it's a negative tax base for them, and to give them that privilege of vote in it, and of course not just taxes, it's every aspect of the American life, of our history, of our culture, and is being taken away from us and robbed. I mean, look, if we're going to do this whole diversity czar thing down at the border, we need that. As we talked about earlier, is that because we've got, military-age young Chinese men coming in, military-age young Russians, military-age young Islamicists coming in.
That's a long walk.
It is.
From China all the way across
It is. It's amazing.
Mexico.
It's amazing how they get there so easily. And if we're going to, so when we talk about their vote not doing us any harm, okay, well, yes, they are in the ways that, Eric described. But what other harm are they about to bring to us in the short term?
Right, exactly. Which I also would call a conflict of interest. Just a little bit there. All right, we got to take a quick break, and we will be back with more. But first, we want to thank Angel Studios, Cabrini. I want to talk to you guys about this film, Cabrini. I want to say it like very heavily Italian, but I feel like I will sound really, it makes you look Cabrini. So it's funny. It's not usual that audience and critics both agree on something, but this has a 98% audience score and a 91% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes.
It almost never happens.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That's like almost unheard of. And it's based on the true story of one woman's fight for equality, health, and happiness of immigrant orphans. This is from the award-winning director of Sound of Freedom, and it is the tale of Francesca Cabrini. an Italian. Was that good?
I think that was good.
Okay. He's an Italian immigrant who arrives in New York City in 1889. And, of course, there's like disease, crime, impoverished children. And she sets off on a mission to convince the hostile mayor to secure housing and healthcare for society's most vulnerable. It is a really, really great film. I highly suggest that you go see it. It is in theaters now. You can purchase your tickets in advance online by going to angel.com/Sarah. That is angel.com/Sarah. So before we get into this next story, I do want to point out Steve and I were talking earlier at the beginning of the show about the story that was going to post on theblaze.com, was about to, and we were pretty sure it's up. Yeah. So you can go view it there, the latest exclusive from Steve on madness that you're dealing with.
You need to read this carefully over the weekend and then wait for Monday.
Oh, see, I told you. It's just the popcorn emoji.
We've got a follow-up coming on Monday.
You always do, Steve.
Well, when they piss me off, I'm going to fight back.
You should have thought about that before you put the man in shackles, okay? Over misdemeanors. So make sure that you go to theblaze.com for that. It is up there. All right. So I want to get to this next story, of course, with New York Attorney General Letitia James threatening to seize Donald Trump's 370-acre Seven Springs estate and golf course if he does not post a bond for the bogus $454 million civil real estate fraud judgment. He did say today on Truth Social that he does have $500 million in cash. He said, through hard work, talent, and luck, I currently have almost $500 million in cash, a substantial amount of which I intended to use in my campaign for president. The often overturned political hack judge on the rigged and corrupt attorney general case, where I have done nothing wrong. If I had a good Trump voice, I would read it in the Trump voice. Knew this, wanted to take it away from me, and that's where and why he came up with this shocking number, which, coupled with his crazy interest demand, is approximately $454 million. I did nothing wrong except with an election in 2016 that I wasn't expecting to win, did even better in 2020, and now lead by a lot in 2024. This is communism in America. So we will see what happens, but he says that he has it.
There's a lot of cash. There's a lot of cash. But if he got it, he got it.
Can you imagine having that much cash?
No, I couldn't even conceptualize.
You're probably almost there, Eric.
Well,
what are you talking about?
maybe in the assets that I own, but cash,
yeah,
like liquefied, like it's man, that's a lot of money. But if he got it, he got it.
It would be, you just hate to see the blows that continue to be given to this guy, just blow after blow after blow. They're just trying to ruin his whole life. It would be nice because that was a plan, right? Like they wanted to be able to take his assets. They wanted that sort of drama. It would be nice to at least prevent them from doing that.
Let me just read to you a tweet from our own Matthew Peterson, our editor-in-chief at The Blaze. He wrote this in October of 2020 before the election. He said, the coming purge. If Biden wins, Trump and his kids will be punished by being prosecuted and sued. They'll try to put them in jail and take all their money. But anyone else associated with Trump will also be systematically attacked and ostracized.
Wow.
Prophecy.
Very much so. That's exactly what happens. What is happening right now.
I called him Matt Stradamus today.
How did you dig that up?
It just popped up in my feed today.
Oh, that's funny. It's infuriating to me. And this, by the way, this is coming from someone, I feel like you guys, I know you know this about me. I feel like you know this about me by now, Steve, is like, I have criticized the man and I will continue to criticize him where I feel like he deserves criticism. I know the people who are mad that like their person didn't win the primary are so often like, oh, you're part of the Trump cult. Oh, you're just a cultist. I'm really not. He is the last man standing, and so I am all in. But like, I've never been one to just ignore and defend Donald Trump's indefensible things that he has done. But with this, all it's done is just made me like, screw you guys. I am defending him and supporting him even more now because of how hard they've gone after him.
I think you've seen that in like culturally in a lot of different aspects as well. Now this is different because you have someone that is or not someone, a group of people that are using the territorial monopoly on use of force, violence, and ultimate decision making in the states, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a completely different animal. And that is when you get like railroaded by those guys and they're able to use kind of that strong arm, that's something that people don't have access to. But you've seen that at a micro level as well, where you get people that are being just unfairly targeted in some way. And it has a way of like having the opposite effect. It's not the Streisand effect isn't quite what it is, but I'm sure there's some sort of psychological term for it. When you see somebody being wrongfully targeted like that, and it has a way of being like, I'm just going to go support this guy even more, especially people that are on the fence. Right. People that maybe more so on the fence, they're going to be a lot more sympathetic and empathetic to this person's situation because they see what you're doing is just objectively bad behavior. Yeah. Right. And I think that's what you've seen with Donald Trump. It
might be easier for people. I'm going to give you last word on this, Steve. It might be easier for people to overlook if things were going great in this country. Right. Like if they were like, I mean, I'm uncomfortable with how they're treating Donald Trump, but Joe Biden's been great on the economy. I'm paying so little for gas. My groceries cost nothing. The border is secure, so I'm going to overlook it. But it's like they're doing this at a time where they also suck at literally everything else.
I was hashtag never Trump in 2016. I was hashtag never Hillary as well. Yeah. Ended up voting for Gary Johnson in that particular election. It wasn't a protest vote. I didn't have anything else to give. But once he was elected president, I cleared the decks, and then I started writing all of my articles, hashtag good Trump or hashtag bad Trump. Yeah. By the time his term was over, I had him at about 50-50. Yeah. And in 2020, I had Biden at -15 entering the race. Right. So I had no choice but to vote for Trump in 2020. Yeah. And now, as we're seeing once again, when you see the persecution, the absolute overbearing weaponization of our federal government aimed at one man in particular, and of course anybody else that did support him and vote for him, then it makes him stronger.
Yeah, it really does. And that's what we are seeing play out here. All right, we've got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. So apparently, breaking news as of the time of this taping, there has just been some sort of a terrorist attack in Moscow at a concert hall. We will, of course, keep our eye on it over the weekend and bring you the latest relevant info next week. With that being said, remember to go to theblaze.com for more of Steve's exclusives. And as he said earlier in the program, he is ready to go scorched earth. And he does mean that. He gets a certain look in his eye when he says it, to where I do know that he does mean it. Although I would mean it as well if the federal government had f***ed with me the way that they've f***ed with Steve. So I'm just going to leave that. Again, Sara Gonzales' words, not Steve Baker's words. I like to say that just because I feel like anytime you're on my show, the DOJ is watching it.
They are.
So, I just like to be clear here. Sara Gonzales' words, not Steve's, but make sure you go over to theblaze.com and make sure that you are following him on social media, particularly on the platform formerly known as Twitter, for more really great stuff that you're doing, Steve. And we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Also, make sure that you are following Eric July as well. Go over to Rippaverse.com, get the latest. It's Yaira.
Yaira, that's it. Yeah,
yes, and so make sure that you go there, get that as well. Support the parallel economy over with Eric, and we will see you guys Monday.